Hi folks, with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the Tucker Carlson interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, it's created something of a furor. The globalist media has gone into meltdown and they've attacked it from all sides with their tightly scripted, centrally coordinated bullshit propaganda talking points. Rather than deal with it genuinely and look at it as, okay, he's a journalist interviewing a major international sort of political figure, which is what journalists do. Instead of that, they've gone after and tried to delegitimize it and tell all sorts of lies and untruths, which is about what I expected, by the way. So no surprises there. But just having a look at the interview itself. Again, the criticisms of I haven't seen a particularly valid criticism yet. You can sort of nitpick it, say Tucker let Putin waffle on about Russian history a bit too long. He could have cut that a little bit shorter. And okay, well, yeah, but remember, he was there to hear what Putin had to say, and whereas some of the frothing at the mouth leftist media wanted Tucker's go, yeah, you Vladimir, you damn fucking Nazi, fucking right, yeah, what are you gonna say yourself? Are you Hitler? Yeah, are you denying you Hitler? That sort of. I mean, well, no, that's not how interviews are done with political leaders. But anyway, now, nothing that was said in the interview, and by the way, when Putin was sort of waffling on, I did fast forward in a few places, so I haven't heard it word for word, end to end. But nothing was said in terms. I'm reasonably familiar with Russian history, so no surprises for me there. I'm reasonably familiar with that history of Eastern Europe and Ukraine, Belarus, and Lithuania, Poland, everything. So again, nothing surprising there. The Nord Stream pipeline being blown up by either the CIA or elements controlled by the CIA and supplied with equipment by them. That's pretty much been accepted anyway. I don't think anybody would really dispute that now. So that was hardly a surprise. And Putin was less than emphatic there. He talked about the people who had the desire and the technical and logistical capacity to do it, and that really narrows the field down quite considerably. And the Biden administration, the globalist controlled Biden administration, wanted to do it and had the capability. And again, this is something that's been discussed in the United States by American journalists, so this is hardly anything new. On the basis of why did Russia go to war in Ukraine? Well, Putin and the Russian administrations previously have been quite clear on this. You cannot have a NATO country that directly borders Russia. They're not prepared to accept that. They're prepared to accept a neutral buffer zone, and that's fine. But NATO was clearly using the cat's paw method to bait the Russians into taking some sort of action, and they got the reaction they wanted. So then they had the moral case for, oh, we're the good guys, he's the bad guy. Putin invades Ukraine for no reason other than he's a Nazi. I mean, that was the globalist messaging that went out, which is of course nonsense. I think Putin and again, administrations and various elements of administration previous to that had pretty much said the same thing. So the other alternative was that Russia became part of a wider security pact, either a NATO or a NATO approximation. And this was something that the Europeans and the Americans weren't particularly interested in. Now, I think there's a few things here. The two main countries that threaten or are seen as a threat to the globalist project and are rejecting the globalist things like the mass migration, like the climate change, like the social conflict through use of black and gay lesbian type feminist issues. The two nations that are opposing that and that are large and influential and capable of shifting sentiment in the area are Russia and Iran. And they're the two biggest threats to the globalist project that also are considered as the biggest. There's a lot of American energy, again, globalist controlled and directed, that's we got to take out these two guys. We can't successfully implement the globalist project as long as Russia and Iran are independent states charting an independent course. They have to come into the globalist fold, which means they have to accept mass migration. They must accept the climate change scam, and they must accept feminist and LGBTQ social dislocation methodologies. And Putin won't have any of that. So he's an enemy of the globalist ideological project, and that's why they want to get him, and that's why they're trying to come at him all, whether it's through provocative actions in Ukraine or gas pipelines or whatever. So that's why they hate Putin. He just is not on board with the globalist project, and so they've used again various methods of provocation, such as now. The Russians aren't stupid. They knew that Ukraine would be an ideological battleground, and it's a very corrupt, country and very divided country. But it had an administration that was, I'm not sure you call it pro-Russian necessarily, it was certainly sympathetic to the Russian position, Russian views, and why not? Russia is a major political and economic and military power right on their doorstep. Well, why go out of your way to antagonize it? You wouldn't. No sensible politician would. You try and reach some form of accommodation with a neighbor like that, and that's what any sensible politician would do that. Now there was, but the Americans organised a coup d'état in effect in Ukraine to replace the Russian sympathetic government with an aggressively pro-US NATO type, European Union government. And it's really all been downhill from there. From that point on, Ukraine was used as a cat's paw to try and shit Putin, and which it did. Finally got a reaction, and Putin lashed out, given the a gazillion warnings he's made there. So the West, US, European Union, they knew exactly what they were doing, that they would get a reaction like this. And so again, that wasn't news to me. That was pretty much how I expected the conversation, assuming that point came up. I don't have much negative to say about it. We haven't heard from Putin for years now, and certainly not by any sort of independent journalism. So I wanted him to talk, and I wanted Tucker to ask a question and let the guy talk. So that's how we find out. Did Putin waffle on, for too long? And so, well, I thought so, but could he have been more succinct? Well, yeah. Now you'd probably get a more succinct version of this if the interview was edited, as in cut down, because I think it went for like 2 hours and 10 minutes or something. You could probably synthesize all the main issues in 20 minutes, 25 minutes maybe max. But if Tucker had done the editing, then he would have been accused of all sorts of things there. And Tucker did say, when this is before the interview had taken place, that he would do the whole interview and would put it on air, online, unedited and untouched, and so on. And that's what he said he'd do, and he did do it. So if he did another version of it, which was edited again down to 20-25 minutes, which would capture all the main points, then that would probably be more watchable and would get him another many tens of millions of views. So just in analysis there, I thought the interview was quite well done under the circumstances. Now the idea that the leftist media, even some in the centre and centre-right media, said, Tucker was on the line there. He's surrounded by KGB goons who are going to kill him, tear him. All he had to do was one word out of place. Putin would have killed him on the fucking spot. That's bullshit. That is bullshit. How much more authoritarian is Russia than Putin arrests journalists? Well, so does Zelensky in Ukraine. Journalists are put out of business and deplatformed in the US all the time. So why are these other things not talked about? When Putin does it, it's diabolical. But if America does it, if Ukraine does it, if journalists are deplatformed in Britain for supposedly saying a Haiti word about transgender, well, that's okay. That's okay. But if Putin does it, it's wrong. No. All censoring of journalists, if that's the game, all censoring of journalists is wrong. If Putin's wrong about it, and so is everyone else who does it. Now, but it's different because Putin puts them in prison. Well, no. How many people from January 6th are in prison? Denied due legal process in solitary confinement, denied legal counsel, or whether legal counsel was brazenly threatened by the state. Hey, you'll never work in this town again if you represent this client, and so on. So no, I don't accept any of that. Those criticisms are absolute and complete nonsense. So I think that Tucker went in there. We want to hear what Putin has to say, which meant any journalist, Tucker included, has to shut up and listen. He couldn't know in advance that Putin was going to waffle that much, and even mentioned Tucker mentioned his own summary that he even pondered whether Putin was filibustering the thing, which would have crossed my mind too if I was there. But I think in the end that they got, Tucker got the answers he wanted, got the information that he wanted, and that information was Putin's point of view as a leader of a major player on the world stage. So I think in that sense it was successful, and I hope there's follow-up interviews by Tucker on other issues, subset issues rather than just the biggest of the big ticket stuff. And so I hope that happens. But I think it was Tucker delivered on what he said he'd do. I think it was an interview of great importance, and I think historical significance as well. I mean, it's on the record now, and I think all the criticisms of it are simply not valid. And looking at the people who've come out against it, and the most vitriolic, Tucker's nothing more than a flunky stooge for a Nazi dictator and so on. What fucking nonsense. And again, all the globalist scripted and all the little globalist flunky globalist stooges running around. But I've had a look at them, and here's an interesting thing, actually. I had a look at the first few that were out, the first few criticisms of Tucker were out. And some of these, if you look at the time stamping, were out, the first few criticisms of Tucker were out. And some of these, if you look at the time stamping, they're clearly written before the Tucker had released the interview. So they predetermined their talking points, predetermined their criticisms, predetermined their position, and then went, multiple journalists across the US, Britain and Germany and Western Europe all came out at the same time. Australia too came out at the same time with these clearly scripted, coordinated talking points that they'd written up again before the interview had even been released. So, that's obviously predetermined propaganda and centrally controlled propaganda there. But I had a look at quite a few of them, including some Russian journalists. And just before I go on to that, there was a number of journalists in Russia that were on the American payroll, NGOs controlled by America or on the American payroll that were acutely critical of the Putin regime, but along globalist propaganda lines. I mean, he's bad to gays, he's evil, and he's against trans, and what's wrong with trans, and why shouldn't children be taught gay stuff in school? What's wrong with black lesbians? That's very much how the globalists, all the methods and devices they use to undermine social cohesion and social integrity in the West. They were trying to push that in Russia, and using Western-controlled journalists to do that, many of whom were Jewish lesbians, by the way. That didn't Putin didn't accept that, or his government tried to shut these people down, and then warned them, and then went after them to put them in prison. Quite a few of them got tipped off beforehand and were able to escape and go to other countries, like Britain or the United States. But make no mistake, there was a very much a globalist effort to take over, as they do in the West, by the way, to control sections of the media, to pump out anti-Putin propaganda, that was purely pro-globalist and anti-Putin propaganda. It wasn't well-considered opinion or well-argued factual stuff at all. So this idea that Putin just rando arrests journalists and criticise them, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. These were foreign-controlled journalists. Now, if that happens in America, they scream election interference, and Putin was paying for Facebook ads, and then it's a terrible issue. So, but if Putin does it, it's bad. But when we do it, it's okay. We're allowed to do it. Just he's not. So again, I just reject that. But coming back to the clutch of globalist journalists that came out, some of them having been expelled from Russia, by the way, I took the time to look into just 3 or 4 of them, I think it was, and they all had gone through the same universities and the same think tanks. This is in the West, and had studied the same subjects, and had worked sometimes at various times for the same group of NGOs. So there's no question these people are paid up globalist propagandists. So it just confirmed in my mind, in fact, put in concrete, that there's a cadre of political activists. Well, I'm not sure they're activists, just globalist shells. And these were the first line, if you like, of commentators and talking heads that came out condemning the Tucker interview and going over, why Tucker's a bad guy, and even sort of going back, Tucker was just this nobody, and just completely trying to delegitimize him as a commentator and somebody with a. Now, I first came across Tucker. I think it was either just before or just after, or maybe even during the 2016 presidential election, US, the Trump one, and I was doing something, and I had the Fox News stuff just on in background. I wasn't particularly listening to it, and this voice came on of going, it's sort of happening behind me because I'm sitting at a desk writing, and the voice came behind me where somebody said, well, I'm going to have a news program where I'm going to ask the questions that you would ask. Now, I was very concerned about the media at that time that was becoming, for some reason, they all seemed to say the same things. It was to me, it had become obvious. It was clearly centrally scripted and coordinated propaganda. It was no longer facts and a clear analysis of issues. Far from it. It was all loaded with propaganda, and it was all lies, and it was all untruths, and it was all misrepresentations, and so on, and the most vitriolic attacks against people that questioned globalization. So to me, that was already the paradigm. So when this guy got up, who I'd never heard of before, Tucker Carlson, got up and said, I'm going to ask, have a program, I'll ask the questions you would ask. I treated with a certain amount of, so what? But I remembered it, and then I don't know, a week or so later, whenever the programs began, I tuned in to, I'll give this guy a go and just see if he lives up to his thing. And he did. He delivered 100% of what he said he was going to. Nearly every question he asked of the pro-globalist flunkies that initially came on, to take Tucker down and deliver the kill shot and everything, which is quite amusing to watch. But he delivered exactly on what he said. The questions he asked those people were exactly the questions I would have asked if I'd been sitting in his chair. So I thought, that's it. Finally, we've got a journalist that is asking the tough questions. But the globalists have never forgiven him for that. And they've maligned him from day one simply because he does ask the questions, which I believe he did in the Putin interview. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.